Well, it feels like Sunday night. It's only, 4 minutes after the hour. Been running around here crazy. Last minute realized there was something going on that I hadn't anticipated, and I was trying to make it work, and for some reason I couldn't make it work. So we may not get to that little segment. That's okay. You won't miss a thing. This is Warren Sprouse. This is the Bible Forum. We're here for you, finally, this Sunday night in May. It's the big middle of May, the Ides of May, May 15th. We've got a lot of things that we want to talk about tonight. I had a little interaction this week with someone over the Antichrist, and there's a lot of nonsense goes around about who that is, what that is, how that works, and we're going to solve all those problems tonight. We've got a little segment a little bit later on in the show. I'll explain that to you. We've also got our Secretary of State in the news telling us some things that we really don't want to hear. I got a lesson for you in exegesis. I know some of you are just thrilled with the whole idea of exegesis. We've got a Harvard professor, I think he's a former Harvard professor, that wants to treat evangelicals like Nazis. And we got 20% of those who call themselves Christian, born-again Christians, who just say, I'm not voting this time around. There's a lot of stuff that we want to talk about before we're out of here this evening. We've got a couple more hours to go. Good to see some of you already popping up. Last week, I didn't see anybody in the chat room. Later on, I got emails from people saying, I was there. There was a bunch of guys in there, people. I don't know what happened. I didn't see it. It didn't show up on my screen, and I don't know why that is. Tonight, it looks like that's happening. We've got a couple of folks in there. We haven't got a full complement of viewers yet, but we'll get there as time goes on. Have you signed up for the Bible Institute? I gave you a bum steer. No, I guess maybe I didn't. I was recording last Monday some lessons for the Bible Institute, and it seems to me I finished up by saying, if you have any questions, you can write to me, and here's the email address, and it was wrong. Rather than go back and fix it, we'll get it the next time around. It's just one time out of 5 or 6 lessons. I don't think it'll make a big deal. But the email is learnbibledoctrine@gmail.com. I always want to put 2 Learn Bible Doctrine in there because I have that one too. But learnbibledoctrine@gmail is really the email address. The other one we'll get here because I anticipate these things, but we want you to be involved. Some of you have been going through this process. Some of you finished your second lesson a while back. The third lesson will begin the last Monday of March. I'm going to give you 2 or 3 weeks in between to kind of catch your breath. Some of you are writing papers. Things are happening. Just turn around and give it to you the next week. It's not good. Spread it out. Some of you haven't signed up since you did the first one, and I don't know if that is a commentary on my teaching ability or whether you just don't really care about it anymore. I don't know, but you started, you ought to finish it. And some of you have said you are, but you haven't, and you need to get involved in this. So go to the website, BibleInstituteofCharleston.net. You see all the things you need to see. You can watch the videos, do your thing. Check it all out, and you can register from that website. We have the major event that occurred this week, and I sent you all an email Friday night. That's only the second time that I've ever sent out an extra email, and I really thought it was worthwhile. You folks, unless you're living in a van down by the river, you know the Obama administration, through their Department of Health and Human Services, issued a regulation, is the way it was characterized. Now they're saying, well, it was just a suggestion. Now, they issued a regulation with teeth, and it said if in our public school system, if you do not open the lavatories to whomever, whatever gender Billy or Mary decides that they are today, then we're going to cut off your funding. Now, that doesn't sound like a suggestion to me. And I know because I know how these things work. I've been around long enough. There are people all over the country who are reacting to that. There are people who understand how the Constitution works. They understand how the system works. I shared some of that with you in the email. If you did not get that, that's not my fault. That's your fault because you haven't signed up. You need to sign up, send me an email so that I can put you on my list. But we have a little thing called the 10th Amendment. And the 10th Amendment says that the federal government has certain rules, regulations, enumerated powers, things that the Constitution grants to the government. Everything else is a suggestion that the states don't have to listen to if they don't want to. 10th Amendment. There's a group in the country, it was the only organization I ever thought about joining. They call themselves Tenthers. And every state in the union, I believe, has a chapter. And they do publications, they do other things. I don't know if they have meetings. Don't know exactly how it's structured. I never did join. But this was several years ago. Because our federal government is becoming more and more intrusive and abusive. And it's not going to stop any day soon. The more they can push, the more they get. I was at a meeting last Monday night. I went to a meeting here in Charleston. They call themselves, the meeting is called the 912 meeting. I don't know if that's a 912 group or just a 912 meeting. It's taken from 9/11. This is the day after. This is sort of all the issues that come. Turns out that they're basically John Birchers. I don't think everybody was, but that was the theme, the kind of thing. And there was a video they played of a lecture given by a fellow who's connected to the John Birch Society. I didn't know John Birch Society is still around. It's a good organization. I remember as a kid back in the 50s driving, we were riding somewhere in the car going south, I don't know, and somebody's barn, big sign, "Get us out of the UN." I said, "What's that?" He said, "That's John Birch." They're still around. And the fellow was walking through some of these events. And sure enough, the end of the week, it was contemporary. It was current. It was something we need to understand. He explained that back a year or two ago, whenever it was, federal government wanted everybody in the country to have a federal ID. And states stood up against this. Initially, it was just one or two. This fellow was from a state, Montana, I think it is, out west someplace. And he said that their state said no, they weren't going to do this. And they were only one of about 6 or 7 states. But over the next couple of months, the number went up, and it ended up about 20-some states, 28, 25, something like that, that stood up and said, we're not doing it. And the federal government backed down. Now, they didn't really. They just went another way. And now in states around the country, we had our driver's licenses changed. They have a unique thing now. They're a little more secure, a little different. And that was the federal government. Because if you did not have one of those kinds of driver's license, you couldn't get into a federal facility without going through all the process and, this, that, and the other. So a lot of states just went along with it. But that's kind of how it works. And I cannot imagine with 28 red state governors, I cannot imagine any of these states tolerating this kind of an edict. It is so bizarre, so dumb. It just has, it's just a problem waiting for an opportunity. So if you have a mind to write or call or do anything, with your people, your state, you need to get a hold of these people. Tell them, not nasty, but just let them know. I said 28, it's 31. 31 Republican governors. So something, well, they say a word to the wise. I ran across an article this week and I entitled it "Apropos of Nothing." It's just pure dumb. The administrators at the University of Iowa called the police and they're offering counseling sessions after there was a Black Lives Matter message on a whiteboard at the university that had been defaced. There were people melting down. They had to go out and offer counseling to these people. Friday, May 6th, somebody wrote an offensive statement, did something on a whiteboard, defacing this positive statement. If it's something, an organization called the College Fix issued a statement, quote, "If you have been impacted by this incident and would like to talk more about it, feel free to contact me directly so we can meet," the memo said. It was written by the Assistant Director of Residence Education, a woman by the name of Monica Marcello. The memo also adds that there are other resources available if the, quote, "incident has evoked strong reaction from you," such as university counseling, Office of Ombudsperson, used to be an ombudsman, but now it's a person, and the Center for Diversity and Enrichment. Stay off college campuses, people. There isn't anything there you need that you can't get someplace else. These people are just going crazy. University of Iowa police responded. They're investigating the incident. Told College Fix, "We will not tolerate anything but a safe and inclusive campus for students of all backgrounds. Nobody's going to feel safe if somebody defaces your whiteboard." What? There was a school, I forget where it was now, where somebody wrote stuff in chalk on the steps going up to this major building, and I think it was threatening words like "vote for Donald Trump" or something of that nature, and they had children on camera in tears. They felt so threatened. It's an amazing world that we live in. We had a number of big shot types that were out, I want to say preaching. They were speaking at college graduations around the country. The president did 4 or 5 of these, I guess, and John Kerry did several and all that. But John Kerry was the one that got my attention because I guess he knows something I don't know. I don't know exactly how all that works. But he was the keynote speaker at Northeastern University. This was a week ago Friday for their graduation. He took the opportunity to criticize the Donald for his foreign policy agenda, saying that the international barriers are, quote, "nostalgia for some rose-tinted version of the past." He continued by saying, "Many of you were in elementary school when you learned the toughest lesson of all on 9/11. So I think everything that we've lived and learned tells us that we'll never come out on top." How's that? We cannot win, we cannot come out on top if we accept advice from soundbite salesmen and carnival barkers who pretend the most powerful country on the earth can remain great by looking inward, then hiding behind walls at a time that technology has made it impossible to do and unwise to even attempt. He says, "You're about to graduate into a complex and borderless world. The growing popularity of Trump's anti-globalist message has caused immense backlash from the political class in Washington, D.C. Trump said, "We will no longer surrender this country or its people to the false song of globalism." John Kerry responded by saying, "That's a pipe dream. We live in a borderless world, and by the time you graduate from college, you're going to see this for what it really is." I don't know if this is his version of a brave new world or maybe just his idea of totalitarianism, but I want to live in a world where there is borders, don't you? A country that does not have borders is no longer a country. They're just a pathway to something else. These people are just absolutely amazing. I mentioned to you at the beginning that someone had brought the subject up about the Antichrist, and I don't know where. I don't know if somebody actually wrote or I heard the conversation, was involved in something, or whether I read this, but it comes up on a regular basis, and people get confused. Do you think maybe Obama's the Antichrist? You know, it's that kind of statement. So I thought it might be helpful for people to get the context, to understand how this all works. I put together a little scenario. This is my impression. This isn't a biblical exegesis, a verse by verse. This is more of a narrative. When we get to the end of the show this evening, the last thing I intend to do is to walk through the Bible version, what the Bible actually says about end times and about the Antichrist. But here is my version, my narrative. It is the year 2033. The United Nations has appointed a 10-nation super committee to take control of the spiraling devastation of war, poverty, and an increasingly unstable global economy. They've appointed a top Western leader to head this effort. At stake, we have Israel, who has been at war with her neighbors for decades. Israel is now on the verge of collapse. The only stable, productive nation in the region is teetering. There's a threat of a serious catastrophe if something isn't done. The world has to step up and stop this. Russia has annexed most of her old Soviet bloc countries, and with her relations with Syria, she has installed herself as the de facto force to be reckoned with throughout the Middle East. Turkey has increasingly threatened both Syria and Iraq, think Kurdistan region and others, and is becoming increasingly hostile toward the West. Egypt has remained relatively calm as long as she stays under military rule, but continues to struggle with the instability that surrounds her, both from the Palestinians, from the ISIS, the Libyans, the Sudan, all of that sort of thing. Iran, ancient Persia, has nuclear capability and the means to use that against any enemy within 1,000 miles, meaning Jerusalem. Nuclear arms are finding their way into the Middle East. Through its NATO alliance, Turkey shares nuclear weapons. Pakistan has nuclear capacity, is bordered by religiously fanatic Afghanistan right next door. In addition, the currencies of the world are dissolving. China is increasingly threatening to undermine the Western financial system. World business leaders are unable to maintain their fortunes, let alone do business on a global scale. And now Muslims are closing in on Jerusalem, threatening to destroy Israel. The Western world is forced to defend her. Now, along with defending Israel, they are defending themselves. They're defending their way of life. They're defending their finances, their trade, and all the rest of it. Along with a world leader to address this problem, the United Nations has appointed 9 other world leaders to assist, one from each of the various trade regions around the world. These 10 leaders, headed up by a Western chairman, set out to bring peace to the world, primarily in the Middle East. And initially, it looks like it's going to work. The pressure against Israel and the markets begin to ease. Their efforts ultimately merely escalate the situation, and it doesn't take very long before open warfare breaks out. There is almost total destruction of both the region and the world. The Muslim world refuses to take any of this lying down. She retaliates all over the world. Russia, Iran, Turkey, perceiving all of this as a threat, react accordingly. China plays the role of opportunist. North Africa is mobilized. The Saudis and Jordan are caught in the middle, fearful of looking as though they support Israel, and there is war. open warfare. And along with that war comes famine and pestilence and disease and economic disaster, social unrest, political intrigue. Fortunes are lost. A third of the world's population is destroyed in a matter of months. On top of all of this are the natural disasters, earthquakes, floods, fires, disruptions in the heavens, rage around the world. Entire countries are ravaged by destruction. Up to 1/3 of the landmass of this world is destroyed. At the end of 3.5 years, things are far worse than they were at the beginning. And if that was not enough, this international leader that was appointed to fix things, to head up this 10-nation confederation, is killed. There's a massive blow to his head from a sword wielded by an enraged militant extremist. And the world is in shock. But then something happens that silences the world. That murdered leader appears in front of a global TV audience alive. Very much alive. Still sporting the wound in his head. But he's alive. He immediately goes about eliminating 3 of the other 9 international leaders. Apparently they were complicit in his supposed demise. He becomes the de facto head of the world. He has power no man can challenge, and he sets about arranging global systems to further his purposes. Who is this man? He is the Antichrist. He does not exist today. He will not exist until that moment. He's not merely human. He is a man possessed by the devil himself. He is a dead man, possessed by the devil who now lives. He is not the leader of some country hiding in the basement of some castle somewhere just to be revealed. No, this is a unique person. He has all the power of government, economy, and military. And he enlists the power, the authority of the world religious leader, appointing this person to be his number 2, to move people both politically and spiritually in order that they would serve his purposes. He sets out to gain financial control. We know about the mark of the beast. He sets about to solidify his hold over governments. He demands absolute worship. If you refuse, even out of ignorance, there is only one result. Can you say guillotine? They're going to cut your head off. He goes after the nation of Israel, primarily those who refuse to worship him. He finds, however, that these people seem to have disappeared from the face of the earth. He cannot find them. He goes after the evangelists, the missionaries, but he finds them difficult to stop. These are the 144,000 witnesses. There are 2 men who have arrived in Jerusalem prior to this event to preach against what is going on, and now to preach against this Antichrist. They have miraculous power. They can influence natural systems, create all sorts of chaos. They can cause fire to destroy somebody or something. And he eventually has them killed. Their bodies lie in the street in Jerusalem for 3 days. And the Bible says every eye shall see them lying in the street, dead. Apparently this is in front of cameras. When it was written, people could not understand that. But you know about it, don't you? There isn't anybody can sneeze on the other side of the world. You can't see it. You could probably see it live if you wanted to. But after those 3 days, they get up and they miraculously ascend into heaven. And they do all of that in front of the camera that never blinks. We can watch birds in a nest with eggs hatching. The camera never blinks. That's the kind of thing we're talking about. This man of sin, this Antichrist, is now enraged, and he doubles his effort to dominate the world, only to see the Son of Man coming from heaven with his bride and with an army larger than any man has ever known. He comes, the Bible says, with a sword, not a literal sword. It is the sword of his word. It proceeds out of his mouth. It is his word, and by his word he destroys all rebellious life from the planet. There are so many people who die, it takes 7 years to bury the dead. He also captures this devil and his demonic associates. He places them in a pit, one from which they cannot escape. And then he sets up his kingdom on earth for the next 1,000 years. At the end of that 1,000 years, he releases the devil, and he is able to find the children, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren, the great-great-great-great-grandchildren of all of these believers who entered in to the millennial reign, willing to follow him, and they rise up against King Jesus one last time. And here, there's no battle. Jesus merely speaks, and they are destroyed. And then the earth is destroyed, and the heavens are destroyed. Our solar system and a new heaven and a new earth are created. And that's where we will live throughout eternity. You want to know what heaven looks like? Adam knew what it looked like. A new heaven and a new earth. My theory is it'll be like the first one. And there will be no death, and there will be no darkness, there will be no winter, there'll be no hot summers, there'll be no any problem. It will be wonderful. And Jesus will reign, and we will reign with him. We'll talk about this a little bit later in the show toward the end of the evening. We'll look at what the Bible has to say, walk through the verses. But this is the overview. 2033, it could start tomorrow. We just don't know. The Bible says that all of this is on a hair trigger. We have no idea when. And all of the counting of the calendar and the imagining and doing all the math doesn't matter. God's going to do what God's going to do. And everything is set today in a way it never has been for it to occur. We'll get back to it.